Numbers don't panic, people do. Let's look at the psychology behind why every market falls faster than it ever climbed. Here is a pattern as old as markets themselves. Prices rise slowly, over months and years, then collapse in days. The climb is a staircase. The fall is a cliff, and the reason is not in the numbers. It is in us. Now the math is an illusion. We tell ourselves markets price assets rationally, weighing value with cold precision. But a price is just the last thing a frightened or greedy human agreed to pay. It is emotion recorded. From a psychological perspective, the asymmetry has a clear cause: loss aversion. The human brain feels the pain of a loss about twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equal gain. Fear simply hits harder than greed. What looks like a financial anomaly is actually a perfectly predictable psychological response. When prices fall, loss aversion screams. When they rise, greed merely murmurs. One emotion stampedes, the other strolls. When the market acts irrationally, it's just human nature scaling up. A single anxious trader is noise. A million anxious traders, all feeling the same loss aversion at the same instant, is a crash. The emotion synchronizes. Consider how a rise actually happens. Confidence builds slowly, person by person. Each buyer makes a private decision over days or weeks. Greed is individual, deliberate, staggered. It accumulates like sediment, one grain at a time. Now watch a fall. Fear is not individual, it is contagious. One seller triggers another, who triggers 10 more in seconds. Loss aversion does not accumulate, it cascades. The mound does not shrink slowly, it collapses at once. Look, emotion moves the needle. And fear is the faster emotion by evolutionary design. The brain that survived was the one that fled first and asked questions later. In markets, that ancient reflex becomes a selling stampede. Observe the panic. In a crash, traders are not calmly recalculating value. They are feeling the threat response, the same circuitry that fires when a predator appears. The amygdala does not do arithmetic, it does escape. This is why crashes feel so sudden even when the warning signs were everywhere. The information accumulated slowly, but the reaction was held back by hope until a single trigger released all of it at once. Fear waits, then floods. Notice this. The same asymmetry appears at every scale. A single stock, a whole index, an entire economy. Wherever human emotion sets the price, the rise is patient and the fall is violent. The pattern is fractal because the psychology is universal. The math is an illusion in another way too. We dress up fear in the language of fundamentals. We say the market fell on weak earnings, but the earnings were known yesterday. What changed overnight was not the data, it was the mood. Now consider the role of the herd. Humans are social animals who survived by watching each other. When everyone around you sells, your brain interprets the selling itself as information, regardless of whether anyone actually knows anything. This is reflexive, not reasoned. You do not decide to follow the herd. Your nervous system does it before you are aware. The sight of others fleeing triggers your own flight. The crowd becomes a single frightened organism. Emotion moves the needle, and social emotion moves it fastest. A private fear can be reasoned with. A shared fear, reflected back from every face and every falling price, amplifies itself in a loop that outruns thought entirely. Now contrast the upside loop. When prices rise, the social signal is weaker. Greed is quieter and more private, often hidden. People hide their winning bets more than their fears. So the upward herd is slower to form and quicker to doubt. This is the deep asymmetry. Greed whispers and hides. Fear shouts and spreads. A market is a crowd wired to amplify one of those far more readily than the other. The architecture of the rise and the fall is the architecture of the brain. Here's the thing, notice this in your own body during a downturn. The tight chest, the urge to check, the difficulty sleeping. That is not analysis, that is loss aversion firing your threat circuitry. And every other holder feels the same thing simultaneously. When the market acts irrationally, it's just human nature scaling up, and nothing scales fear like a falling price. Each tick down is a fresh alarm to a million amygdalas at once. The price does not just reflect fear, it manufactures more of it. This feedback is the engine of the crash. Falling prices cause selling, selling causes falling prices. Fear feeds fear in a loop with no natural break except exhaustion. The market does not find the bottom rationally, it collapses until the panic burns out. Now the rise has no equivalent engine. Rising prices do not trigger the same reflexive buying frenzy because greed lacks the survival urgency of fear. You can miss a gain and live. Your ancestors could not miss a threat and live. Here's the thing about bubbles, though. They are the rare moments when greed finally does synchronize, when the fear of missing out borrows fear's machinery. And notice what happens then. The rise finally gets faster, right before it gets violent. That is the tell. When a rise starts to feel like a panic, when greed moves at the speed of fear, the asymmetry is about to reassert itself. A market that climbs like a crash will fall like one. Borrowed urgency is always repaid. Notice this. Observe the panic in history. Every great crash has the same fingerprint. Years of accumulation, then days of collapse. The dates change, the assets change, the technology changes. The nervous system does not. The pattern is human, not financial. Don't follow the herd. Study it. Because the herd is not random. It is predictable, driven by emotions you can name and anticipate. The trader who understands loss aversion is not immune to fear, but is no longer blindsided by it. Understanding the mechanism changes what you see. A crash stops looking like a verdict on value and starts looking like a wave of synchronized fear. And waves, however violent, pass. The water is always still again on the other side. This is the practical edge. If fear is faster than greed, then the moments of maximum fear are the moments of maximum mispricing. The crowd, fleeing as one, sells good and bad alike. Panic does not discriminate. That indiscrimination is opportunity. But knowing this and acting on it are different things because you have the same nervous system as everyone else. The hard part is not understanding the herd. It is not joining it while your own amygdala screams at you to run. So emotion moves the needle, including yours. So the discipline is structural, not heroic. Decide your rules when the water is calm, before the wave hits, because in the moment of panic your reasoning brain is the first thing to drown. Consider how the professionals exploit this. They are not smarter about value, they are calmer about fear. They build systems that force them to buy when the herd sells, removing the trembling human hand from the trigger at the worst moment. This is why the math is an illusion if you think it lives in spreadsheets. The real math is the arithmetic of crowd emotion, how fast fear spreads, how slowly greed gathers, how panic compounds. Master that, and the price charts start to read like a heartbeat. Notice this final asymmetry. A rise that took years can be erased in days, but the fear that erased it also passes in time, and the patient accumulation begins again. The staircase rebuilds. The cliff is only ever a moment. So what do you do with this? First, expect the asymmetry. Never be surprised that the fall was faster than the climb. That is not a malfunction, that is the design. Surprise is what turns a predictable drop into a personal panic. Notice this. Second, separate the signal from the stampede. When everyone sells at once, ask whether the value truly changed or whether only the mood did. The chart isn't showing a drop in value, it's showing a spike in collective anxiety. Third, pre-commit. Write down what you will do before the fear arrives, because you cannot reason your way through a threat response in real time. The decision made in calm is the only one your panic self can be trusted to follow. Now, none of this makes you immune. The goal is not to feel no fear. That is impossible and would be dangerous. The goal is to feel the fear, recognize it as the herd reflex it is, and then not let it hold the trigger. Observe the panic, but from one step back. The trader who can name what the crowd is feeling has a quiet edge over the trader who is simply feeling it. Awareness is the gap between you and the stampede. Widen that gap. Here's the thing the asymmetry teaches above all. Markets are not machines, they are crowds. And crowds are nervous systems wired by evolution to flee together fast and gather together slowly. Price is just the readout of that ancient wiring. So the next time the market falls faster than it rose, you will not see chaos. You will see loss aversion synchronizing a crowd in real time, exactly as it always has, exactly as it always will. Predictable, nameable, survivable. And when the panic burns out, as it always does, the patient accumulation will begin again, one cautious buyer at a time, rebuilding the staircase that the cliff erased. Fear is fast, but it is not permanent. Greed is slow, but it is persistent. The math is an illusion, but the psychology is bedrock. Learn the psychology and the illusions stop fooling you. You will still feel the fear in the crash and the greed in the boom, but you will know their names, and a named fear is a smaller fear. Now study the herd. Map its fear and its greed. Expect the cliff after the staircase and the staircase after the cliff. The market will keep doing what nervous systems do, and you, understanding it, can finally stop being surprised. Because in the end, the asymmetry is not a flaw in the market. It is a portrait of us, drawn in price, fearing loss twice as hard as we hope for gain, fleeing together and gathering apart over and over, generation after generation. Don't follow the herd. Study it. See you next time.